What's up guys, Richard here. Now that it's the start of the new year, it is January 2024, I thought I would do a little bit of a review of what I'm doing for my personal health routine as well as my longevity approach. So I'll cover all aspects with the foundations and lifestyle components and get into some of the nuance as well. Now keep in mind at the time of filming this, I'm 37, so we have to keep that into the context as far as the things that are going to be important for me may not be necessarily important for you, or certain things based on my age currently are not that important yet, so we won't be diving into, but I will outline a little bit of things that if I was older, what I would be looking at. Now of course, general disclaimer that this is not medical advice, this is just me sharing what I'm doing. If you do want a personalized approach that's tailored specifically to you, you can reach out to me. As I do work with people and consult regularly, you can book a discovery call with the links down below and we can dive into that more. But for now, let's jump in and see what I'm doing with my personal approach. If you want to skip ahead, I have put the timestamps down below so that you can jump to whatever section you feel is going to be relevant for you. So I will go through my general lifestyle stuff, testing, personal supplements, and then some more nuanced esoteric stuff like stem cells and peptides. So feel free to use the timestamps and jump ahead to where you feel it's important for you. Now for those familiar with my approach, I start with the key core pillars of health around environment, sleep, stress, nutrition, and movement, and then I add in a little bit of the biohacking side of things as well. So I'll start with some of the baselines as far as the core foundations, because of course those are the most important things to focus on. A lot of people get distracted with the biohacking and the testing and the supplements, but really when we talk about health and longevity, the things that are the most important are those foundational components. If you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, then you can't out-supplement a bad lifestyle. It's just not going to happen. So let's see what I'm doing in my personal side. Again, starting with the core foundations, we'll cover sort of environment, sleep, and stress all together. So key things that I'm focusing on at the moment, mostly with my morning routine around environmental components. Obviously, first thing in the morning, getting morning light as soon as possible, trying to get fresh air. In my house, I'm also using a HEPA filter and air filtration, because again, in the house there's lots of potential toxins, and also just in the environment overall. Now with that morning routine, I'm also going out first thing and walking barefoot, so that way I'm getting my morning sun, I'm getting some movement, and I'm also getting grounding. So I do that every single day, and that's a core focus for me. As far as sleep, my sleep has always been pretty good, so there's nothing too spectacular that I'm doing. The key things for me is regular consistency and making sure that I either dim the lights or start to lower the lights at night once the sun is down, or I'm using blue blockers and different types of software. If I am using any electronics or anything like that, or if I'm reading, I'm using sort of more orange or red lights and trying to make sure that my circadian rhythm is always in a proper state, because this is going to drastically shape and shift where our health is at. Outside of that, I'm not doing too much special around my sleep, because again, my regular routine is pretty consistent between that morning light and reduced light at night. I sleep pretty well, so I don't have to worry too much about that. As far as stress and stress reduction side of things, I'm trying to do at least twice a week meditation at the moment, but then also adding in other types of stress reduction practices. So, walking my dog, playtime, reading, hobbies, whatever it is, I'm trying to add in throughout the day, and that's playing a big part in my stress reduction practice personally. And of course, this is going to be dependent for everyone, but really you need to have something that you're doing to make sure that you're reducing that stress. So as far as general lifestyle components, those are sort of the things that I'm doing at the moment. And again, a lot of that is sort of tied into my morning and evening routines, so it becomes habitual and I don't have to track it or worry about it too much. It's now just like brushing my teeth first thing in the morning. As far as nutrition and what I'm eating, again, for my context, having an autoimmune condition, I am more animal-based. So my predominant diet is going to be meat and animal-based meats. It's mostly the core of what I'm eating, with a few low-toxin vegetables in there, carrots, cucumbers, zucchini, a little bit of pumpkin and a few starches like that, even some white rice every now and then. And then, of course, the primary carbohydrate for me is mostly going to be fruit now, and low-toxin fruit. So that's really simple as far as what I'm doing. I'm sort of 80-20, so I still, have a little bit of fun every now and then with nutrition and eat out and have other things. But as far as the core of how I'm eating, it is going to be a somewhat sort of ancestral / animal-based hybrid diet where I'm getting those foods in predominantly. Now, when it comes to movement, this is obviously a big component, and I'm glad to see that a lot of the people in the longevity space now, like Rhonda Patrick and Peter Attia and a lot of these big names, are all really espousing the benefits of exercise and strength training and just general movement for longevity, because I do think it's something that has gone vastly undervalued and underutilized in the longevity space. And if anything, it's also been somewhat countered in a lot of the anti-aging longevity area, because people are doing a lot of things like extended fasting and low protein diets based on more, petri dish research or animal model research, not based on human trials. I think now we're realizing how important it is to maintain muscle mass, bone density, and all of these things. And it's probably a net negative on health span and lifespan to actually reduce your protein intake and do too many fasts if it comes at the expense of a loss of muscle tissue. Because muscle tissue is going to be one of the single most important things to maintain as you get older, especially for quality of life, right? If it maybe gives you 1 or 2 years longer, but it's at the expense of having good quality of life, and you become more frail for 5 to 10 years prior to that, it's really not worth the trade-off of doing fasting and low protein diets. So personally for me, I believe staying higher protein and maintaining muscle mass. And so strength training is going to be a really important part of that, and also maintaining a high enough protein intake, as I kind of outlined in my nutrition side of things. So to break down what I'm doing, I'm currently doing at least 2 days a week of some type of endurance cardio-based aerobic activity. For me, that's mostly trail running. That's my core aspect of what I'm doing. And then I try to get in at least 1 to 2 whole body strength sessions a week. Ideally, 2 would be my target. Don't necessarily always hit it. And then one definitely that I'm doing daily as a non-negotiable is daily mobility. And again, this is something that I think people vastly underutilize and don't put enough importance on. A lot of people talking about do your endurance, do your strength training. But if you can't actually move well and all your joints are decrepit as you get older, you can't get up off the floor, you just generally have very poor movement quality and poor joint health quality, then that's going to be a big detriment as you get older. So for me, it's a non-negotiable. Every single day I do some type of movement mobility type of practice, whether it's yoga, stretching, something like that. Even just movement-based practices, Tai Chi, martial arts, any of those are going to be really valuable to incorporate. And this is just low-level practice, right? It doesn't have to be strenuous. I think a lot of people focus too much on the strenuous-based activity, but really what we should be focusing on as a core is low-level, continual, varied movement. So non-negotiable for me. I try to get that in as much as possible. I'm hoping to get back into a couple other things this year as far as martial arts, given that's my background, but at the moment with my schedule, I just can't fit that in. But I'm hoping to get back either into some judo or perhaps some other type of martial art later this year if I can. And I'm still also trying to get in some rock climbing, archery, and hikes every now and then, sometimes once a week or a couple times a month. So I've got a few things that I'm trying to do regularly on the movement side. And I probably should have touched on with the environment perspective, that kind of ties into some of the things I'm doing for nature exposure as well. So at least once a week, getting some nature exposure out in a park, and then once a month or once every couple of months doing a much longer, like full day hike out in nature. There's lots of data to show the benefits of being in nature for overall health and potentially for stress reduction, and all of that plays into longevity as well. Okay, time to get into some of the more interesting things. I'm sure people are curious as far as what I'm doing for my personal supplement protocol. Again, I keep things at a very basic level. So if you're familiar with like the Brian Johnson protocols, I'm nowhere near that. I try to think about what is the low-hanging fruit, what are the simple things that I need to make sure I'm getting in. And a core premise for me is making sure that I'm approaching things from a food-first perspective. The supplements are supplemental. So I'm only adding in things that I feel are important because they're either difficult to get in the modern day, or I'm just being particularly mindful of adding in things which have very good research for either health, longevity, anti-aging, etc. So let's dive in. Of course, the first thing that I'm doing, given that it's my own company, is my beef organ supplement. So I'm taking this one pretty much every day, and I mix and match sometimes different things between liver, kidney, blend, a host of different things, but my blend here is liver, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas. So it's a really well-rounded approach, and that just is more my sort of multivitamin, quote unquote, because it covers most of my bases as far as the key nutrients that I need in the diet for overall good health. Plus it has the things like various types of peptides and everything else in there. So beef organs is definitely a daily one. The other thing, first thing in the morning that I'm doing is molecular hydrogen. So not everyone is familiar with this one. It has a ton of research around the benefits across many different things. But every morning I'm having a tablet of molecular hydrogen with my water as soon as I wake up. Then I'm doing magnesium, fish oil, vitamin K2, still doing a probiotic because I think there's plenty of research around the benefits of a probiotic. And then I do like a bone cartilage, bone marrow complex as well, almost every day. That's sort of my base stack that covers sort of everything that we need to be mindful of from at least a low-hanging fruit perspective of having a good foundational supplement protocol that will cover the basis. To give a little bit more context, things like magnesium is important because a lot of our soil now is deficient in magnesium, and it is one of the core cofactors for pretty much all enzymatic processes in the body. I think it's something like over 300 or 400 processes require magnesium. So really important one. So I still recommend that as a baseline. Fish oil, for me, I'm really only just getting in maybe 1 or 2 servings of fish or seafood a week. So on the lower end, just given some of the issues with toxicity. And there's still such a good amount of research around the benefits of fish oil. So I'm doing 1 to 2 grams of fish oil every single day still. And then the K2 is another one where there's a growing amount of research, and it's one of those things that we don't get a lot of in the diet. You get some from liver, but there seems to be a growing amount of research, not only around bone health, but even cardiovascular health, anti-cancer health, a few things. So K2 is another important one. Now for anti-aging, because we all want to look pretty and make sure that we stay looking young as we get older. Again, keep in mind, I'm not even 40 yet, so for me, my anti-aging approach is pretty basic. Supplemental things that I'm doing currently are hyaluronic acid, around 100-200 milligrams a day, and that's a really nice one. There's a lot of people taking hyaluronic serums, but actually the research doesn't show there's very good transdermal absorption of hyaluronic acid. It doesn't seem to do much, whereas taking it orally, we seem to get better benefits. So hyaluronic acid is really important for skin, collagen, joints, everything else. And I've got a lot of potential joint issues as I get older, given a lot of injuries. So hyaluronic acid is a big one. And then collagen peptides ties in with that as well. And I know there's a lot of mixed research at the moment around collagen peptides, but the consensus seems to be that there is benefits, at least for wrinkles. So even from that perspective, it's good to continue taking collagen peptides for an anti-aging approach. If you have a really good diet with sufficient amino acids, it doesn't seem to make too much of a difference, more for like recovery joint health, because you can synthesize a lot of the amino acids from the full range of essential amino acids. But I still think there's potentially benefit of having collagen in there regardless, and it's pretty cheap and inexpensive. So still using collagen with a focus on the wrinkle side. That's really all I'm doing for anti-aging at the moment. I know a lot of people are going to be asking, why aren't you taking NR, NMN, or spermidine, or some of these other compounds? I've actually stopped taking NMN. I was for a little while, but based on some of the new research, for anyone under 40, 45, your NAD levels are pretty good, and you probably don't need to be spending the money on such an expensive supplement, because NR and NMN is extremely expensive, and you could get away with just taking niacin. So if you're getting enough niacin in your diet, whether that's from taking a niacin or niacinamide supplement, or even just getting enough from, say, liver and things like that, then you should be fine as far as your NAD levels, and probably don't need to be doing NR, NMN, or NAD infusions. And it's going to save you a lot of money to put towards the other things that matter. So I've stopped taking NMN, and I've also stopped taking any senolytics for now. So things like quercetin, fisetin, those types of compounds. I may cycle back on them at some stage, but I think there needs to be more robust research into their benefits, and the whole area of senolytics is still a growing area of research. So we need more human data to see the actual benefits from it. As that comes out, then I may look to add them back in more often. But I can still see, especially again, if you're over 45, 50, there may be some benefits of doing a round of some senolytics for a period of time as those senescent cells become more abundant. But for someone under 40, 45, there's probably not that many senescent cells yet if you're generally healthy. So again, probably just from a cost savings perspective, may not need to actually worry about senolytics. Now looking at some biohacks, again, most of the things I'm doing now are pretty low-hanging fruit, simple stuff. I'm actually not doing too many biohacks at the moment since I'm no longer in my clinic that had all the wonderful tools. The main things for me are the simple stuff. So blue blockers at night is really probably the only thing that I'm focusing on as far as managing my circadian rhythm. If I did have a couple tools around the house or a higher budget, or if I wanted to go visit some facilities, things that I would consider adding in would definitely top of the list be red light therapy. There's just such a plethora of research around its benefits. I do have a red light here and I do expose myself every now and then to red and infrared. But doing even daily red light could certainly be something to add as a biohack into the process. I'd be looking at doing infrared sauna and cold exposure, whether that's plunges, probably twice a week. Wouldn't need to necessarily look at doing that more. So those two can certainly be in there. At the moment, I probably get enough heat stress exposure here in Queensland in the summer, just doing my trail runs in the heat. I can tell you that my body temperature is definitely elevated for an extended period of time. So I don't think at the moment I need to worry about too much heat. And even just doing yard work out in the sun in the backyard is more than what I would get in a sauna. So for now, during the summer here in Queensland, I'm not worried about any of the heat. Could definitely look at considering doing some plunging and ice bath work just to add in the cold side of things. But if it's not available to you, it's not too much of a concern. I know at the moment it's a really big thing, but again, if we focus on the foundations and the things that matter most, it's more going to be about the stuff that we've covered that's going to move the needle the most. One other thing that I am adding in as sort of a biohack is more my nootropic program. So at the moment, I am always playing around with different nootropics. My core stack is going to be a choline donor, so that's something like alpha-GPC or cytocholine, tyrosine, caffeine, and nicotine. That's my kind of core stack at the moment that I'm still doing regularly for periods where I need to just pump out a bunch of work. And then on and off, I might play around with some different aspects of things like either some of the racetams, bromantane. One I'm looking at the moment is 9-MePC, which all of these kind of help boost dopamine. So I'm always playing around with a few different nootropics. I'm actually going to be potentially releasing a course around nootropics, so keep an eye out for that to see if I bring that one out to market very soon. Okay, let's dive into some of the testing that I'm doing, because this is a really big component when we're talking about longevity, especially, right? We want to be thinking about a preventative-based approach, and testing is a core foundation of that to make sure that we can actually objectively see where our health is at and how things are changing. So a baseline recommendation that I do for myself and I recommend to all my patients is always at least an annual full blood panel. So doing things like your full blood count, complete metabolic panel, looking at hormones, whether male or female, and a few specific markers, lipids, making sure you're looking at things like ApoB and some of the more comprehensive lipids. If they're only looking at HDL, LDL, we want to do a bit of a deeper dive on those. And things like homocysteine can be in there too. So full blood panel is always something to do at least once a year, if not twice a year, and depending on what you're working on. And for me, I'm going to be looking at a couple other tests that are more advanced for longevity. So specifically, I'll probably redo my True Age PACE test from True Diagnostics. So this is one of the methylation clocks. The PACE one is probably one of the more clinically validated ones that's looking at your pace of aging. It does do the full methylation epigenetic clocks, but there's still some discrepancy there of how valid those actually are. But the PACE one is certainly good to see as a trend over time to make sure that you're aging slower than what your chronological age is. So basically, if you get a score of 1, that means that you're aging at the same rate as your chronological age. Under 1, which is ideal, means you're aging slower than what your chronological age is. So I'll be doing that one again this year. And then I'll also be looking to go see my friend and colleague, Dr. Simon Barbet, to do some pulse wave velocity analysis. It's a measure of the tension and pliability of your blood vessels to give us a much more validated indication of potential cardiovascular risk. So this is a really excellent one. It's very rare to find a clinic that has this. So if you have someone in your area doing pulse wave velocity, highly recommend it. I will be checking mine. Again, I'm sort of that lean mass hyperresponder where my cholesterol is a little bit higher, but all my other markers look healthy. And if my pulse wave velocity stays in a healthy range, then I'm not worried about any cardiovascular risk. But it's certainly something that I'll check regularly, along with the standard things like blood pressure. Now, if I was a little bit older, say 40 or 45 and older, there's definitely some screening tests that I would be doing personally, and I would recommend to pretty much anyone to look into. That would be things like colon cancer screening, particularly for males, as that's one of the #1 killers. So pretty much from 40, depending where you're at, if you've had a history of GI issues, from 40 it would be a good idea. From 45 onwards, definitely a good idea to do every couple of years. So do colon cancer screening. I would potentially look at doing, at least as a baseline measure, a coronary CT angiogram or a calcium score. I might actually look to do a calcium score this year anyway, because again, when we're thinking about things from a preventative-based approach, the earlier we start to get some metrics and track that over time, then the better we can actually see trends. So might look at something like that this year. And then of course, there's a growing utilization of things like whole body MRI, which if you have that available could be something to look into for early cancer screening. But keep in mind that this is still a new technology and has a high rate of false positives, meaning that they'll catch something that isn't actually cancer, but it says it is. So keep that in mind when you're doing your testing, and make sure that you're going to a place that has really good radiologists and clinicians that are able to break down what the scans actually mean and provide the context and nuance into your specific health scenario. So those are some of the tests that I will be doing this year and that I would consider looking at depending on where I was at in my personal approach, and some of the things that I'd be looking at depending on where your age is at. Now, for anyone that follows people like Brian Johnson that are doing these crazy longevity programs, he's got $2 million that he puts into his program. So if you've got a higher budget, there's certainly some things that you can look at. But from my perspective, again, I would approach it from what are the low-hanging fruit, right? So you probably don't need to do a lot of these extreme things. And even a lot of the data is still quite sparse around some of these supplements and biohacks and other things. So things like spermidine, NMN, the research is still very young, and we still need a lot more data to show that these actually make a difference in the long term in humans. So keep that in mind. But if you do have a bigger budget, then there's certainly a lot more things that you could be looking at incorporating and tying some of those in. So certainly NMN, spermidine, those are two top ones that there seems to be growing amount of literature around. So you could certainly look at those. One exciting thing that I would consider adding in if you had the budget, and that I'm actually potentially looking at adding in as a once or twice a year protocol, would be some specific longevity peptides. So that would be things like humanin, apidolon, or MOTS-C, or other types of mitochondrial derived peptides. These are really interesting ones because they actually seem to have pretty good research at the moment for enhancing longevity and overall health span and lifespan, particularly some of these mitochondrial derived peptides like MOTS-C. And not only do they seem to have benefits for longevity and overall health, but they even seem to have some benefits in performance. So if you're trying to find that balance between performance, health, longevity, then these can be really interesting products to consider adding in. But of course, like most things, make sure that you're getting them from a really good source so that the quality is of the highest nature, particularly around peptides because they are such sensitive molecules. And there's a growing amount of research now around things like stem cell injections, and even young blood transfusions. So if you had the budget for it, those are very expensive processes now, and also still in its infancy in research. So there's still a lot of things that need to be sparsed out around the safety and efficacy of stem cells. And I would make sure to see someone like maybe Dr. Abil Khan, who is a very renowned doctor in the space, and utilizing sound processes and good manufacturing processes for generating those stem cells. Those are probably two things that I would be looking at that seem to have very promising research now between stem cells and young blood transfusions. But always find a good clinician to be able to do that in a good space to do it, because you want to make sure that you're actually using safe and effective stem cells and any type of treatment that you're utilizing. All right, so that breaks down what I'm doing right now as my personal health and longevity program. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments, or please share what you're doing in your space as well, or even if you have recommendations for me or things that you think that I should be adding in, I'd love to hear from you guys and see what you're doing or what you would recommend. And again, if you want to work with me around developing a personalized and tailored health and longevity program, you can always reach out and book a discovery call. And if you want to learn more about my company, Vital Origin, and beef organ supplements, if you're adding those in, jump on to vitalorigin.com.au. If you're enjoying this content, please remember to like and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel and it will help me keep producing this free content for you.